anytime early in American history, especially when black leaders rose up, there was a swift and demonstrative response from. What's up, Crew Excellence? It is your boy, the host, Justin Strickland, and I'm back with another episode of the Ladder Podcast, and I'm so excited to be with you today on the first day of Black History Month. Shout out to my people. Hey, if you are new to the Ladder, make sure you like and subscribe, share for more leadership content. Today's episode is going to be super amazing. Hopefully, I'm going to drop some knowledge on you, some things that you might not know, and if you don't know what we do here, this is a podcast all about leadership. We develop leaders, and we think everybody is a leader. So yes, you are in the right place so that you can grow. And the reason we want to develop leaders is because we believe that everybody, when they are their best self, make the world a better place. And so it's our job. We feel it's our role, our purpose to help you be your best self, because in that way you can impact the world at your maximum capacity. And so we thank you for being here today and putting in a little bit of work, a little bit of time, because we know you could be anywhere, but you hanging out with your boy, and I don't take that lightly. So let's jump into today's episode. Today, I was thinking about how I wanted to start Black History Month. I've been doing some highlights. I did highlights last year on some different leaders. I had some people come in, and I was like, nah, first episode I want to do, because this is something that's near and dear to my heart, something me and my wife talk about often, is the vacuum we experience with Black leadership. And what I mean by that is, in America, there's been a systemic elimination of Black leaders. And because of that, that has impacted the way that we trust leaders, the way that we desire to become leaders, and what that leadership looks like. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of history today. If you don't know history, you're in the right place. If you love history, you're in the right place. And if you don't like it, just hang out, man. You got nothing else to do. All right, so we're going to talk about this. I'm going to go through just different moments in history where we have Black leaders with followings, with impact and influence, and how the system in America dealt with them in a way to discourage other people from leading and to eliminate or to discontinue movements that have the opportunity to shift or change national things, okay? And so let's jump into it. So the first person on the list, right? And this is, and mind you, there might be some people before and after. I chose to highlight some people. There's a lot of people, but I chose to highlight some specific ones, right? So the first one I'm talking about is Nat Turner. If you haven't seen it, Nat Turner has a movie that came out in the last decade. And Nat Turner was an abolitionist. And so during slavery, he was in a field, looked up, this is according to him, looked up, saw a vision, and saw the Lord tell him he was Moses, and that it was his job to free African Americans. And so he goes on this slave rebellion, one of the most successful slave rebellions, and man, goes on for a while, takes out a lot of people, frees a lot of slaves as far as like taking out their masters and things like that. And eventually he's caught and murdered publicly to discourage, any other people from getting that ideal. And actually it was him and a lot of his co-conspirators, some people who helped him in the rebellion, they were also punished publicly. And so this is the interesting part to me about the story, right? And this is when we talk about like systemic racism. A lot of people try to push back on it, but what you can't deny is the history of systemic racism. And so what I mean by that is we're not talking about private citizens. So the Nat Turner Rebellion was wildly successful against private citizens. So when it was slave owner versus slave, the rebellion won. Because, and this is like, goes back to like that Kanye West thing, like slavery was a choice, all that kind of stuff. The ideal that slaves, because there were more of them, could just take over plantations is only a half truth, because this is what happened in Nat Turner Rebellion. The slaves, because there were more of them, with not any guns or anything, took over a lot of these plantations. And they grabbed guns as they were taking over more and more plantations. Well, what ended up happening is eventually the National Guard was called. And so the U.S. military was called to fight against this rebellion. And it was actually the U.S. military, this National Guard, that squashed the rebellion. So the private citizens were able to call on the government, right, to protect their land and protect their way of life. And so that's a systemic thing, right? If you can call on the army or the military, that's the system. And we're not talking about private citizens and their racism. We're talking about the system saying, no, black people, y'all can't be free. Right. And so and when they publicly murdered Nat Turner, they were sending a clear message. Hey, don't get no ideals. This was going to happen to you. Right. Like he's not a hero. And they made him out to be a villain. Right. And I think even and there's some reports that said they made it so that he could not be buried. Right. And so they wanted to basically get rid of his entire historical presence. Right. Because they're trying to send a message like, no, that's not allowed. And so that's one of the first ones, right? So then in the 20s, we get Black Wall Street. And if you don't know what Black Wall Street is Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know, one of the most random cities in the country. But in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they had created this neighborhood, this place where the black dollar was staying. And not only was it staying, it was creating wealth and creating comfort. And so it was Black Wall Street. They said the black dollar stayed there longer than any other place in American history. And this caused some tension, right? Because what happened with Black Wall Street is it became self-sustaining, where people didn't need to go elsewhere to buy goods, to get products, to bank, to like it was a fully sustaining apparatus or neighborhood. And so you see these black people were wealthy and in Oklahoma, which is, like I said, very random, but it caused some tension. And so the age-old story in America, if you study anything about civil rights, anything about early American history, I want to say this correctly. There is always an unnamed white woman who accuses a random black man, and then the response from the white community is often a riot or massacre or mob. And so we see this happen in the Tulsa massacre. A guy named Dick Rowland, African-American man, was accused by a white woman of a crime. Mind you, the crime was in public. There was no consensus of what he did. It was just an accusation. And the white community in Tulsa said, we're going to go get Dick Rowland. Well, the black community said, you can't have him. Which means understandable, right? A mob comes to your community to take one of your members. You're not going to say, man, here, y'all can take them. So they said, you can't have them. They said, bet, and burned the entire Black Wall Street down. Not only, and this is so interesting when you read about it, not only did they burn Black Wall Street down, there was KKK members that set up around Black Wall Street, and as people were running, they shot them. And so, and this is what I'm talking about, systemic racism, right? The police in Tulsa do nothing to protect the people in Tulsa, right? This is a riot, right? This is a mob. It was nothing to protect the people. The KKK, which is a known terrorist group, has no repercussions, never put on trial, never accused of anything, convicted of anything, none of that. And the National Guard is finally called in. This is after days of rioting, after days and days of burning and shooting and looting of these black businesses. The National Guard is called in, and basically the National Guard is like, hey man, y'all just go home. That's what they did. They took, hey man, y'all just go home and leave these people alone. Like it's too late, y'all. This was an opportunity for the black dollar to grow and economic affluence to happen, and it was completely squashed out by the systems in Tulsa. And so Black Wall Street is definitely an interesting instance of black leadership, specifically black financial leadership, being systemically eliminated, okay? All right, moving on. One of my favorite people in black history, Marcus Garvey. And so Marcus Garvey was Jamaican born. He was an immigrant to the United States, and he was a Pan-Africanist. So he was one of the first Pan-Africanists. And I've done a whole episode on Marcus Garvey, I think. We've done a lot of stuff. I think I got an episode on Marcus Garvey. But he was a Pan-Africanist, and his whole thing was like, hey, man, they're not treating us right in America. Let's go back to Africa. And they was like, how you gonna do that? With what ship? And he was like, I got a ship. And so he went and got a ship. He had a newsletter, $1. This is why I think Marcus Garvey's cool. One of the coolest stats ever. Using $1 donations, word of mouth, through the newsletter, he raised $1 million, y'all. $1 million in the early 20th century. We talking about real money, real cash. And this is like financial, it's showing like how many black dollars were in the country at a time. And so this one man was able to raise $1 million. He had the ship. They was like, we got to get rid of him. He comes up on the FBI list. We got to get rid of him. And they get him for tax fraud, and they deport him. The crazy thing about the tax fraud was it happened in his office, but for all reports, Marcus Garvey had no clue. He wasn't touching the money. Like, he didn't have nothing to do with it. He was just the one they blamed. It's the age-old rapper get caught with, you know what I'm saying, in a car. It's a gun. Obviously, the gun is the rapper. Like, it was their same kind of concept. And so they got Garvey on tax fraud. And this is the thing. This is how we know, like, it's systemic. We know that's how they got Al Capone. Like, this is something that the government has done. When they feel like someone has power, they will find a way to get them out of there. The difference between Marcus Garvey and Al Capone is Al Capone was a criminal. Marcus Garvey was not. He was not a criminal. He was a African American leader. And they were like, yo, we got to get him up out of here. Just point blank period. So they get him out of there. He goes to Jamaica. He still does some Pan-African stuff in Jamaica and things like that, but they get him out of America. And so we see that vacuum when he's out. And so I want to make sure I'm slowing down and talking through what I'm trying to display is anytime early in American history, especially when black leaders rose up, there was a swift and demonstrative response from America as a whole. It's one kind of system. If it's the police, the FBI, the army, right? There was some sort of response from the system that said, nope, you can't do that. And then there was a vacuum. Then there's time and space, right, in between the next leader. And so Nat Turner dies in 1831, right? And so then there's a space where we have some other rebellions, none of them as big. Then we get emancipation, right? And we get free, and we go through Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow, and all that happens before we finally get some footing and we get Tulsa, right? And then the Tulsa Massacre happens in 1921. And it's like, dang, setback again. And then Garvey comes to power. And then Garvey is deported in the 30s. I think it's late 20s or 30s, right? And so it's some time in between that. And then we have a lull. It's a gap. And in the late 50s, right, we start to kick it up again. We start saying, all right, man, we got to figure something out. We got to do something. And so civil rights begins to happen. And the first guy I want to talk about is Medgar Evers. So Medgar Evers was a civil rights activist in Mississippi, right? On the grounds, probably the most famous activist in Mississippi at the time. And he was coming home. And so his wife said, because of his stuff, they added him to the Mississippi kill list. So this is something that exists. This is a KKK police sanctioned list based on who were the activists in the state that were causing trouble for the system, right? And so Medgar Evers get put on the Mississippi kill list. He come home one day, got some T-shirts that say Jim Crow must go. KKK hired a sniper. This is confirmed information. The KKK hired a sniper to kill Medgar Evers on his front lawn in 1963. And mind you, so when I'm talking about systemic stuff, you might be like, man, the KKK, that's not, well, this is the thing. For the KKK to have operated as long as it has, as publicly as it has, with zero repercussions. They're not on a terrorist list. They're not considered domestic terrorists. The only way that can exist is if the system, the FBI, the government, Secret Service, the police don't consider them a threat. And the reason they don't consider them a threat is because they only threaten African Americans. And so that's when we talk about systemic elimination of black leadership. Allowing the KKK to operate is, if anything else, it shows you like, man, that ain't really our problem. Which is interesting because we are also Americans. So for people to terrorize Americans, that is the American government's problem. But that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about the elimination of black leadership. And so the KKK snipes Medgar Evers on his front line in 1963. Sends shockwaves through civil rights. So you got to remember, they didn't kill Garvey, right? They deported him. So it had been a while as far as black leadership for anyone to be murdered, right? Lynchings were happening. But lynchings, for the most part, were random in the sense of who got lynched. There was often a random black man or a random black boy. This was the first time during the civil rights movement where a leader was targeted and murdered. And so we see Medgar Evers get killed. Now, 2 years later, Dr. King is on the balcony in Memphis, gets killed. FBI sanctioned hit. You can look it up. They have been convicted of the murder of Dr. King because not only did he get shot on his balcony, he was alive in the hospital and and then smothered and suffocated, and nobody knows what happened. The FBI has been convicted of his murder. That's a systemic elimination of a leader, right? That's not a I'm not, and that's the thing. I ain't even a conspiracy theorist. That's not what I want that's not what I want you to leave this podcast thinking. I'm talking about confirmed things. The FBI has been confirmed of Dr. King's murder. That is fact, okay? There is a huge fallout from Dr. King being murdered. We get the riots, we get civil rights destabilization, an entire movement gets basically dismantled with the murder of Dr. King. And it's so interesting, I always like to note, when Dr. King got murdered, he was no longer just fighting for African-American rights. He has turned and realized he was fighting against capitalism. And so he was in Memphis to march with sanitation workers so they can get unionized because he was fighting against poverty, right? And so Dr. King gets killed. Take him out. Before that was in 1965 when Malcolm X got killed. And Malcolm X gets killed. Remember, Malcolm X was seen as the kind of outgoing, any means necessary guy, civil rights movement. And so he gets killed by the Nation of Islam, right? From all accounts. But all accounts also say the Nation of Islam was infiltrated by the FBI. And if you've ever seen the movie about Fred Hampton, which I'm gonna get to in a second, the police hired an informant to snitch on the Black Panthers. They did the same thing with the Nation of Islam. And so they had an informant and he was feeding them stuff and making it so that they felt Malcolm was against them, even though Malcolm was never against the Nation, right? And so he broke ties with the Nation because the Nation got tired of him publicly using platforms. And so Malcolm X gets killed. And this is what was important about Malcolm X getting killed. Malcolm X was the reason the Nation of Islam grew like it did. So Nation of Islam was a fringe movement. Most considered them radicals, even within the black community. But then Malcolm X gets popular and they start to grow exponentially. And so they sow discord within the Nation of Islam and get Malcolm kicked out. And then Malcolm's like, I'm gonna start my own thing. And that's when Malcolm gets killed, right? And so Malcolm gets killed in 65. Then fast forward, Dr. King gets killed in 68. And then there's this movement called the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers are even more dangerous than Dr. King and Malcolm X. And the reason is the Black Panthers realized before Dr. King and Malcolm X did, it ain't about being black. It's about the money. And so the Black Panthers were organizing the Puerto Ricans, the poor whites, the Hispanics. Like they were like, it's called the Rainbow Coalition. You should look it up. Fred Hampton was organizing all these people who were disenfranchised and saying, hey, it's more of us than it is the oligarchy. It's more of us than it is the financial elite. If we come together, we can fight back and make some change. They hire an informant. Fred Hampton is gunned down in his apartment with his wife and with some other Black Panther Party members, and that is convicted. Chicago PD, FBI convicted of the murder of Fred Hampton. They shot, I think, man, it's like almost like 8,500 bullets into his home, right? Trying to this ain't a raid, this ain't an arrest. That was an assassin. That is murder. That's an assassination, right? And so that happened in 69. And I say all that to say, right? So I went through a few of these leaders that have been assassinated, been eliminated in some form or fashion by the system. And the reason I want to go through this is you might look around now and be like, where are our black leaders today? Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I think we have some that exist, like Barack Obama, that are in the public eye. But the issue is is that since the Black Panther Party was targeted and assassinated, and after Fred Hampton, the FBI kept dismantling the Black Panther Party. It wasn't just kill Fred Hampton and that's it. They put drugs into the Black Panther Party. They arrested guys. They arrested guys for stolen ice cream. It's crazy. If you study what the FBI did to the Black Panther Party, it's absolutely wild. And so then by the time they fully dismantled the Black Panther Party, we get to the 80s, and now they insert drugs into communities, and it's all sorts of stuff. They put the drugs there, then start the war on drugs, and it's all these different things that wanted to keep Black people from rising or elevating as leaders. Because here's the thing, for a lot of my people who be like, it's individual ascension. Like work hard and you can be who you want to be. And here's the problem with that. That only works if you want to impact you and your family. But if we're talking about impacting a community, right? We're talking about leadership of an ethnic group. It requires community buy-in. It requires community respect, and it requires community visibility. And so for someone to take a look at the history I just gave you, man or woman, and be like, I'm gonna do it. You have to count the cost, but you also, in an age of bipartisan, of social media, short attention spans, you have to be able to capture a community for long enough to actually get something done. And that is way easier said than done. And so this episode is not a Debbie Downer, right? I do want to highlight the systemic elimination of Black leadership, but I want to highlight it in a way that says, hey, we need some people. We need some people. We need some people who can step up, who are willing to put their life on the line for the opportunity to change something, whatever that may be. Because I think we look around and we're like, man, it's better. And the reason it's better is because the men and women who I just talked about, who sacrificed their lives for better. And so if we want to keep growing, if we want to keep moving towards something more, because there is more to be had still in this country, we got to have some people step up. And we got to have a community that says, hey, man, we believe in you. And we're willing to ride with you. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves, sacrifice in our own right to support you, because that's what it's both and, right? You can't have leaders without community, and you can't have community without leaders. It takes both and to actually impact the world, impact our people. And I know we can do it because I've seen it in the past. It's just when and how and who are the questions that need to be answered. And so I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you fact check me, right? I hope this episode sparks you to look some stuff up that you didn't know. And in doing that, I hope your eyes are open to the ideal that we are capable of leadership. And we do have a community that wants change. We just need some people that are willing to put it on the line to do it. All right, man. And it might be me. I don't know, man. We'll see. But until then, I'll holler at you, man. Appreciate you hanging out with me. It's going to be a dope Black History Month. And until next time, it's been a privilege and an honor. Your host, Justin Strickland of the Ladder Podcast. I'm out, man. Peace.